Awesome. Excellent. Well, thanks, David. Thanks, Krista. Joe, great to see you again. So my overview or my piece of the application modernization section is really going to focus on some of the fundamentals that we use to help us organize around the opportunities presented by our clients as they look towards application modernization. So we've selected one of our clients with whom we're actively working. We're about 18 months into the relationship. We've built a POC, we've built a pilot, and now we're really starting to scale the program. So I'm going to provide some context around what all that meant, some of the things that we learned, some of the adjustments that we made, and most importantly, some of the best practices or the kind of the core capabilities that we applied in this example. So the areas that I'm going to cover are really the business case. So what is the problem or the opportunity against which we're applying application modernization? I'm going to talk about the concept of business architecture and what it means to organize around the opportunity. We use that information to help us inform a thoughtful technical infrastructure or technical architecture. And then I've got some screenshots and some best practices that we incrementally applied as we were undergoing this journey with the client. So that said, let's get started. So our business situation is that basically our client is a network operator. They have a high volume construction business within the network around which they provide services. So if you can imagine a company that invests over $1.5 billion in building out their network and infrastructure every year, obviously there's some maintenance involved with that as well. But in the call center, in the construction group, we've got an audience of 12,000 users, and they're managing 1 million discrete custom construction jobs. So if you think about going in and doing surveys and getting permits, every one of those 1 million jobs is different, and that's what makes this problem a bit of a hairball. So the client is basically a combination of 6 different companies that merged over the last many years. And so the client has actually already merged a number of their legacy systems onto a common heritage construction platform that serves some of the basics of their need. Where they see opportunity and the things that we've been helping them with over the last 18 months is really establishing visibility, getting a level of control across these million jobs. And now we're starting to apply improvements to help them with performance. As we look towards the future, we're actively working with this client to upgrade and modernize this architecture to more current standards, to a lot of the themes that we talked about already, and I'll talk about more in the discussion today. The kind of the big, hairy, audacious goal for the client is basically to automate everything. In construction, labor is 70% of the cost, and they want to get that labor as efficient as possible. So 1 million jobs, 12,000 users, where do you even begin? So one of the things that we've been using for quite some time, and this is an evolving discipline out of the object management group, there's actually a subcommittee called the Business Architecture Guild, and they advocate for best practices around these themes, is basically setting context for your organization. And some organizations, they do that with operating models. Other organizations do that with value streams. At the end of the day, the assets or the practices are not as critical as just having the concept of having what we call a business process architecture. So having a sense of organization for the business and the processes that deliver value on behalf of that business. Practically, what this looks like for us is that we align those big goals, those basically the operating model, with capabilities. And this is really where business architecture begins. So if we think about capability mapping or value stream mapping, you're not into BPMN diagrams, you're not doing kind of workflow design. You're really just putting together the big building blocks of what it means to understand the core processes that operate your business. We are big proponents of the concept of product management. So basically, when we're applying software to enhance or enable these capabilities, ideally there's a sense of value there's a business case, there's an understanding of how the business goals tie into the software deliverables that underpin that. And in our theme today around application modernization, when we think about continuous integration, continuous development, and agility, this is a really important theme, because ideally with the applications that you're modernizing, if you have active product management, it means that you're continuously improving that software that you're delivering. So one of the other disciplines I'll talk about later in the discussion is that user experience is critical to business architecture, because the concepts of understanding your personas and your constituents is key. It's also important to have the concept of a journey map. In the case of this client, it's actually the employee journey that's important, because the employee is serving the client, and that's where the customer experience resides. And then beneath this capability map, that's where you then start to organize around what are the processes that you need to start to model out, what are the high value problems to go solve. And in network construction, really what those core capabilities are is that when you're starting a construction job, you've got to run a survey. This is a nationwide company, so there's permits that need to get pulled, and those are varied across the US. In California, they've got an office of a couple hundred people that manage permits. I think in Texas, there's like 3. They get the work assigned to subcontractors that actually go out and do the job. That job needs to be inspected and accepted, and then people need to get paid. When you peel back the layers on these high-level capability elements, there's a lot of process steps, there's a lot of activities, there's a lot of opportunity for improvement to automate, and that's really the vision that we're going after. One of the things that's important that is in place at this client is that they're also a big SAP shop. And what that means is that there are a lot of core processes that SAP is just going to own, and SAP has predefined steps and stages for things like work orders and payment and so forth. And so as we look at the technical situation, it's important to understand, what's custom and what's going to go onto the platform systems that actually run core parts of the business. So ideally, there's a level of equilibrium between those two, and we're in regular discussion with this client about what lives in SAP versus what we're going to externalize through process and help orchestrate or empower SAP even further. That brings us to the next major concept. Once we've organized around the business opportunity and we've got a good business architecture and clarity to our requirements, we know we're dealing with an automation opportunity. In the world of automation, the 3 core components or the 3 key kind of descriptors that we use are we automating a task? Are we automating something that needs to get orchestrated or has the concept of flow? Or are we automating decisions? And then the visual below is some perspective of how we look at the world in terms of the technologies or the technical capabilities that are currently in the market that fulfill these requirements. And what's important is that, we've been doing this for 10, 15 years at this point. Some of the componentry below the circles here, that changes over time, but the best practices do not. And ideally, there's an informed decision that's made in terms of whether you're going to put your decision logic within the bounds of the RPA platform, or whether you're going to orchestrate things with workflow, or you're going to externalize things with a decision engine. These are important decisions. So when we look at our example for the client, what we've actually settled on is that our reference architecture is going to be a combination of Camunda for process automation as well as process mining. Back in the olden days, they called that business activity monitoring, and that's more the pattern that we followed because we were more intentful, we were more deliberate about how we hooked Camunda into the infrastructure to really understand what was happening. Tableau is used for in the rear view mirror reporting. So if we think about business intelligence and visibility into construction performance over time and historically, that's where Tableau comes in. We use a combination of Camunda with the Brazos Task Manager for active visibility into the jobs that are in flight. For now, we're not doing anything with machine learning or augmented intelligence, and we're externalizing decisions with Red Hat. It's worth noting that the client at this point wants to drive all automation into their core platforms, and so they've deferred any work with RPA until a future point. there may be some opportunity with RPA to integrate to the websites for the different jurisdictions to which, against which they pull permits and do those types of things. So really, really helpful context here to help us understand, here's the type of automation that we're going to do, and then the boxes into which much of the logic that we're building will fit. The other thing that's important is that ideally this automation stack works in complement with the platform decisions that the organization has made. So we know that this is an SAP shop. We know they use Salesforce for client and vendor management. And then there are some custom legacy systems that we need to enhance or work with productively as well. One of the key strategies we're using at this client is that we're actually lifting the processes into Camunda process by process, thereby making this legacy system extinct over time. Because of the sheer volume and users and just the complexity of construction within the four walls of this client, they can't just rip and replace the legacy system. It would be too much risk. So as part of the decision in moving forward into the new architecture, the decision is really that part of the process naturally belongs in SAP. There are elements of the process that will be complemented by Salesforce, but everything's going to get orchestrated by the workflow engine, complemented by decisions being externalized through a decision engine. So summarizing this up before we get into some specifics, we want to make sure we've got effective product management. We've got a clean definition of the business opportunity and the business case. That helps us make an informed and thoughtful decision around what engineering elements we're going to apply. So we're not just building something for, building something's sake. For BP3, that's often led to really good outcomes, and we work hard to maintain the track record that we've got. So let's talk about the solution itself. So as part of, so the first stage that I'm not going to talk about today was really the proof of concept. And that proof of concept was there to prove the enterprise decision for Camunda. It was there to talk about the enterprise decision around Red Hat and prove that out. We also used that to prove that we could do Dockerized containers, that the Kafka engine would work with a solution. We really tested a cross-section of what you see here is the kind of the Lego bag of application modernization opportunities. So in Agile terms, we basically spiked on a number of these concepts, and spiking basically means you pull the high-risk items forward so you can fail fast. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? Because it gets really expensive when you find that out later in the project. So these were, the items highlighted in red are ultimately what were going to underpin the pilot. And what we did in the pilot was we said, you know what, we're going to do this in a minimally invasive way. So the proof of concept proved the technology, but we said, let's validate the proof points by incorporating a process layer, or basically by putting Camunda workflow across the legacy systems just to establish visibility. So yesterday, Andrew talked about BPMN diagrams, and that's what you're seeing here. That's ultimately what we built in Camunda that then hooked intentionally into the back-end systems of the client. And then we used our Brazos Task Manager, which is the view on the bottom left, to, in a very unfiltered way, just to surface visibility to the tasks and the buckets in which the work resided. And then we created just a really basic milestone view, which is here in the middle, that basically shows across hundreds of thousands of work orders in what bucket is the work. We found a really high value business opportunity in that visibility. And I think this is a big part of why process mining is getting as much traction as it is in the market, is we saw that 20% of all work orders were in kind of a paused or on hold status, and the client pulled together a SWAT team to go clean up the loose ends. So basically there was a bunch of work that was maintenance work or things that people never got to, but there was no Tableau reporting, there was no visibility to highlight that. And man, did we light that up when we applied the end-to-end process to all the activity that was in the system. So not only did the client get visibility, but they were able to apply a level of control and performance even in this initial stage as well. So as part of then the next stage, we've identified a greenfield process, which in this case is permitting. So none of the legacy systems really handled the permitting function end to end in a clean way. And so I've got some screenshots around that, but that's actually going to be going live in the next couple of months, from which we will then go after the end-to-end process and really automate that as well. Permitting is really well suited to process orchestration because it's really complicated. It needs control points. You need consistent measurement. Across all the jurisdictions in the United States, everybody's got a bit of a different permitting flow. So it was a really great opportunity to add value. So as part of engaging in the pilot and going forward into this end-to-end system, we also then took that opportunity to bring in our user experience team. And it's not to be understated the value of design in terms of really staying true to the high-level goals of the solution. So these are actually the client goals. And in the first slide, I talked about automate everything possible. But when you peel it back, some themes that really speak to the power of workflow or process engines are that you don't want users to become experts in the system. Have the system guide the users, have the system through the flow, automate the work, the handoffs, the control points, etc. Don't make the users have to work for the system. Ideally, you've got a task list where at any given point, the work that you need to do now is actually there waiting for you. It's pushing work through. And ideally, the documentation, training guides, ideally that's embedded in the screen so that the user doesn't really need to think. Basically, you're turning construction in a network organization like this, you're turning it into booking an airline ticket. It's clicking through, you're getting guidance, the system's prompting you to fill things in. It's really the value proposition of process orchestration at its core. So for us, when we talk about what we did in design is there were user interviews that were conducted, we did journey mapping, we did a bunch of prototyping and testing. The end-to-end flow was wireframed, and basically we used these techniques and these best practices, and Andy's going to talk about this a lot more tomorrow. We use these concepts to basically take the portal view, which was the stock Brazos task manager that you see in the back with the multiple shades of blue, to really clean that up into a more robust task management experience, which is what you see here in the middle. And one of the things that's pretty significant in this view is in the top corner where it says my jobs, my permits, my tasks. This is really the true power of workflow automation, is that you've got embedded layers of process and activity and business lenses through which you're looking at this information that you can then expose through the task manager. So if somebody in the call center just needs to see what are the tasks that I need to do, they go to the task view. If they want to take a step back and get a 36,000 foot view of everything that's in flight, they look at their jobs. What are the construction jobs end to end for which they're responsible? And then they can drill down into permits as well. So what's really powerful here is you've got multiple layers of visibility into the work. And that is super important when you're managing through 1 million work elements. And that's just construction jobs. So 1 million construction jobs multiplies out to 10 to 20x that in terms of tasks, in terms of permitting sub-elements. There's a lot going on here. One of the things that we also did, or the design team did, was they used the opportunity to clean up some of the views of the data screens where people enter data, make file attachments, things like that. So I wanted to provide some context into what that looks like here as well. So last point before I kind of sum this up. So we found once we applied the visibility project, so we did the pilot and we displayed the end-to-end visibility, we realized that the way the tasks were assigned and the way service levels are enforced, so tasks that are overdue or not overdue, is actually highly sophisticated at this client because of the different regions, because of the different construction job types that need to be enforced. And so that was actually both of these were fantastic candidates for externalization of this logic via rules. And what's really important here is that these rules can be administered by folks at the client without having to re-promote code when they change. They can be tweaked on the fly and applied. They can be validated in a QA environment. It really speaks to the power of modular design and making sure that you're not burying your business logic into the guts of the solution. This is something that we've seen across a number of our clients, is the more that they're able to externalize business logic, the more flexible, the less brittle, the less, hey, I'm going to fix one thing and break 10 others. You get a lot less of that. And so we really love this, this design principle. So summing it up, I talked about the POC where we took the high risk items and made sure that we were clear of any risk there. We then did a pilot where we gained end-to-end visibility to the business opportunity that then helped inform the roadmap of what were the high value problems, what were the good opportunities for us to go after. We are now in the middle of our program delivery where we've really started to ramp up, set up parallelization of tasks. This client would like to be self-sufficient or have a level of internal capability around the solution as well. So we're doing what we call co-development with our team and their team. And then ultimately, as we release this solution in a CI/CD paradigm, we will then have a group of folks actually in a sustaining mode, maintaining this application over time as some of the underpinning systems get changed, like SAP, like Salesforce. So it's not often, it's important not to overlook the fact that sustaining is a really important thing to budget for and to plan for. So yeah, so that's kind of the overview and our intention here, and I'm being intentionally ambiguous about the client because when we're live next year, we will have them speak both here and at one of the vendor conferences, and we're looking forward to that. I really didn't want to steal their thunder, so they'll come out with their story next year, and we're looking forward to that. So thanks, everybody.